Joe Burrow and the Bengals are getting ready to play in their preseason opener, and while the final score isn't going to matter, there is an interesting balance that Cincinnati has to manage with its franchise quarterback, and in this video, I'll explain the challenges that are going to come with that. Hi again, Bengals fans. John Sheeran of A to Z Sports Cincinnati here, and we are at the onset of what should be a very different preseason for the Bengals, at least compared to years past. And just personally speaking, I'm really looking forward to it, because the preseason is very nice to see players that you don't normally see play, try to make a name for themselves, try to make the roster and everything like that. But also, good football is good football, and the better the players are on the field, typically the better the product is. And in years past, obviously, the Bengals have typically not played their starters pretty much at all during the preseason, which has led to, let's just say, sloppy performances. And as we've known for a while, that's set to change this year. Starting Thursday night against the Philadelphia Eagles, the Bengals starters will play pretty much the entirety of the first quarter on both sides of the ball, and then week 2 against the Washington Commanders, you'll see a lot more playing time for the starting 22. Of course, even when starters do play in the preseason, the full playbook is not unleashed. We're not seeing the final iteration of whatever this Bengals team is supposed to be in the regular season. And part of that aspect, specifically with Joe Burrow, is what really fascinates me about these next 3 weeks. Because Burrow, per usual, is the story here as he's entering his 6th year in the NFL, and if you put a 1 in front of that 6, that is the total number of preseason snaps that he's taken in his career thus far. Burrow playing significant snaps in the preseason has basically never been a thing, aside from a little bit last year when he played just a drive in the preseason opener. And he only played that one drive because he was coming back from a season-ending wrist injury. The year before that, he couldn't play due to a calf. The year before that, he couldn't play due to appendicitis. And the year before that, he was coming back from a torn ACL, and he barely played at all. And then the year before that was COVID, and there was no preseason for anybody. Burrow has only played in 2 preseason games in his entire career, and he's guaranteed to play at least 2 this month. But that, of course, isn't the question. The question is, what are they going to look like from his perspective? How quickly is the ball going to come out of his hands? How much is he going to be willing to extend plays? How much is he going to be testing his offensive line and testing his internal clock? That is the main mystery here, and that is the one thing that I'm going to be watching closely when they take on the Eagles in Philadelphia. Because we've talked about it on this channel before. One of Burrow's superpowers doesn't really come out until late in the season when he's really in the groove of things, when he's really feeling himself in and out of the pocket. Whereas in the beginning of the season, he doesn't take as many risks. He's a lot more conservative with the ball. He gets the ball out really quickly and ends up taking even more sacks. And that's the biggest reason why he wants to play in the preseason more this year. Because as a team, you can't simulate an actual pass rush against your own quarterback in practice when you're not allowed to touch the quarterback at all. And as he was forced to sit out in past preseasons due to injury, he was basically thrown into the fire every single regular season and just hoped that he would figure it out on his own as the season went on. But what does that cost them in the beginning of these seasons when they start out 0-1, 0-2, and 0-3 in some cases? So as Burrow is now using the preseason to get ready for the regular season, how much is he willing to push it? How much is he willing to risk his body? And how much is the team willing to risk their quarterback potentially getting hurt? Because I'm just going to be honest here. There is no point in playing Joe Burrow if he's just going to be dropping back for a second and getting the ball out of his hands. Jake Browning can do that. Desmond Ridder can do that. Joe Burrow doesn't need to do that. We don't need to see him throwing screens. We don't need to see him throwing quick hitches. He can do all of that stuff when week 1 rolls around. We don't need to see that. How is he going to handle pressure? Is he going to be conservative? Is he going to be aggressive? Is he going to hold on to the ball? Is he going to try to extend plays? Is he going to put his body in danger in an exhibition game? That is the most fascinating aspect out of all of this. Because I think part of him needs to do that, and I think the Bengals also know this as well. But again, how do you balance that as a team who needs Joe Burrow healthy for the 18 weeks in the regular season? And of course, the cherry on top is their first opponent, the Eagles. Even if they don't play their starting defensive line, including defensive tackles Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis, I'm not even sure the Bengals' starting interior offensive line can block their backups. But this is what Burrow wants. He wants to face actual pressure before the regular season pressure arrives. And finding that balance between gaining that valuable experience and protecting the franchise is going to be very interesting to watch.